Please subscribe.
Okay, Chris Pick's here back again with former Congressman Mo. He's going to give me his insights into what happened this tragic weekend that's going to live in our country's history. Congressman, how are you today, sir?
Doing great. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. So, Mo, before we start, I want you to tell me basically a little bit of what happened that day. Because a lot of people don't know that, you display a lot of hero bravery that day. A hero what happened that day.
Well, you go back to 2017, the Democrats were attacking us on our desire to repeal Obamacare. They were accusing us of wanting to kill American citizens when the issue is how much money do you have that's available to properly assist people with their health care? And if there's not sufficient money available, who are you going to take it from? And what is the adverse effect going to be on those people from having diminished their resources that they need to take care of their own families? But the Democrats, they didn't want to look at the pros and the cons of their policies. Rather, what they wanted to do was try to portray us as killers of people who, for whatever reason, had neglected to take advantage of the opportunities in America to the degree where they would be able to pay for their own health care like the vast majority of Americans do. So that's kind of the political setting where the Democrats, with their verbiage, set the stage. Then we move to the actual attack on Republican congressmen. It was at remember the Titans with Denzel Washington in Alexandria, that high school's baseball field. It was early morning. We start practice at 6 o'clock, and probably around 7:15 to 7:30, the assassin started to attack. He came in from the third base side. His first shot was outside of the chain link fence at our third baseman, Trent Kelly. And that means you're looking at a guy with a rifle shooting at a United States congressman who's standing still about 15 to 20 feet from where the assassin is shooting from. And we call Trent Kelly Lucky Kelly because the assassin missed. And in retrospect, having examined the site, we determined that what happened was that the first bullet hit the chain link fence, broke a link or two in the fence, and that deflected that first bullet. So once the first bullet was fired, people who were playing shortstop like Gary Palmer, people at second base like Steve Scalise, people in the outfield, they immediately focused on where the gunshot came from and started running as fast as they could towards either the first base dugout or the field exit along the first base foul line. Now, this fence, just to give you an idea, was about 10 to 12 feet high. So it's not a fence that is easy to just jump over, as is the case in a lot of kids' ballparks. This thing was very, very tall, difficult to scale, and you'd be an almost stationary target if you tried to scale it. So the focus was on getting to the first base dugout, which was about 1.5 feet below ground level, or getting out of the ball field through the one open gate. Immediately after the first shot, and I was the second closest guy to the assassin outside of our third baseman, Trent Kelly. I was in the third base dugouts on deck circle. So if you know anything about baseball, you know the on deck circle is between home plate and the dugouts. So I was the closest person, and my back was to him. The first shot was just a loud blam. I thought it was a fireworks or a car backfire or something. It never even occurred to me that it would be an assassination attempt at a baseball practice. But I turn around and I see the gunman approach the third base dugout's chain link fence, and he probably figured out that the first shot hit the chain link fence. That's why he missed killing our third baseman. So then he put the gun barrel through the chain link fence. And that's when I saw him and the gun barrel as I turned around to figure out what was going on. Almost instantaneously with that first shot, there was bedlam on the ball field as people started hollering, shooter, shooter, shooter. And also in this process, the assassin starts spraying bullets. Fortunately, he's not a very good shot. He's just spraying bullets down towards second base and right field. And that's where he almost accidentally hit Steve Scalise. Steve Scalise was playing a second baseman during our batting practice. I saw Steve Scalise go down. I heard him shout, I'm hit, words to that effect, along with the other shouts. I've got two bats in my hand that I've been swinging as I warm up for batting practice. And I drop those bats and immediately run around the batting cage that is over home plate and drop the bats, and I drop to the ground. And I start hugging the dirt, quite frankly. And you may ask, well, why am I hugging the dirt around home plate? It's because the batting cage has a dark plastic bottom that goes up about 1.5 feet. So the shooter at least couldn't see you. Now, of course, that thin plastic's not going to stop a bullet. But if you're lucky, he doesn't know to shoot there. After a while, the four of us who are lying on the ground, either on our own or collectively, figure out that all this shooter needs to do is walk along the third base dugout towards home plate, and we're sitting ducks. We're on the ground. Easy shots, probably 10 to 15 feet. We'd be stationary. He'd be at the backstop fence behind home plate, and it'd be all over for us. So thinking about that, someone either individually or collectively make the decision that we're going to run to the first base dugout, which is about 15, 20 yards. And we start sprinting in that direction. I'm last because I came around the third base side to get cover behind the batting cage. And one after the other, we just literally dive into the dugout. Some people got minor injuries, scraped knees, scraped hands, diving onto the concrete floor. Some of them landed on top of other congressmen or senators or staffers who were helping with our baseball practices. And collectively, there are probably 10, 15, 20 of us on the ground of that first base dugout. And to kind of put this in contrast to what we all saw on the replays on TV, the attack on Donald Trump was maybe 5 to 10 bullets fired in at most 30 seconds of time.
Right.
At the ball field, according to the FBI report, the shooting lasted about 7 to 8 minutes and roughly 160 bullets were fired. So it was about like a war zone where there was a shot every 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds from beginning to end, either by the assassin or by two Capitol Police officers. The assassin had a rifle and the two police officers had handguns. And we, the people who are in the dugout, are caught between the guns. The assassin is at the third base dugout, using it for protection and also shooting through the chain link fence, while the Capitol Police officers are around the first base dugout. The dugouts are cinder block. While I'm in the dugout, the Capitol Police are yelling us to get down. But before I knew that the Capitol Police were responding, I had crawled the length of the dugout towards the right field fence, which would have given me at least a chance of sprinting to the gate that was open around the right field fence. Because if the shooter got onto the ball field, we'd have no protection. So that's what I was thinking. And so I'm hugging the dirt as close as I can. I'm climbing over bodies. None of these people are injured. And 3 or 4 different things happen. First, as I'm at the steps that go out of the dugout towards the right field fence, I hear the shooter, and you can hear every now and then the pinging as he hits the dugout concrete. There's all of a sudden real close, a loud blam, 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 blam. And I'm going, oh my goodness, there's a second shooter. And I thought we were in real bad shape at that point. I look up to see where the second shots are coming from, so I'd be able to recognize the danger and be able to respond as best I could. And it was a Capitol Police officer shooting. And that's when I knew the cavalry had arrived, that we had a chance of getting out of this in reasonably good shape. So that was one both terrifying and most gratifying moment. Terrifying because you think it's the second shooter and another bad guy. Gratifying because you see that the cavalry's arrived. Somewhere in this process, a kid, 8 or 10-year-old kid, he's the son of our coach, Congressman Martin, a kid comes to the top of the dugout steps and looks down at us. And I'm looking at him, and there are bullets that are being fired in every which way. And he's probably thinking he's raised right, that he shouldn't go jump in on or walk on top of these congressmen, respect for your elders. But at the same time, he's a sit duck. And I scream at him to get into the dugout. Don't worry about falling on us or stepping on us, but to get down, down, down and do it now. And so he kind of got out of his fog and he did what I instructed him to do. So at least he was not hit. That would have been tragic to have a kid hit in this gunfire. Another thing that stood out was one of our staffers, a fellow by the name of Zach Bart. He came running in from the right field line. Instead of going out the gate, he went into the dugout and he did a dive. And he hit me. He hit Senator Jeff Flake. He hit Congressman Williams from Texas, and he lands on top of us. And he's hollering out, "I'm okay, I'm okay, I'm okay." And I'm looking at him going, "No, you're not okay, dude. You've got a hole in your leg." And I took off my belt, and that was used as a tourniquet to staunch the bleeding. And in retrospect, I thought he was nuts saying he was okay when he had a hole in his leg. But in retrospect, he might have just been talking to himself, because he'd run all the way from the right field warning track where he's getting shot at by the assassin. He'd gotten hit, but he'd made it to the dugout. So he was probably telling himself that he was okay, contrasted to where he was. And certainly in the dugout was a much better place to be, because you were below ground a little bit and you had some protection. Then another thing that stood out was the call by the Capitol Police, "Shoot her down, shoot her down." And what I had feared when I was on the ground by the batting cage is exactly what had happened. The shooter had finally figured out that there are a bunch of us congressmen in the first base dugout, and if he made it around to home plate, he would be able to shoot us as sitting ducks on the floor of the dugout. Because now looking the length of the dugout where you can see down into it. And fortunately for us, he waited until he did that. And then when he did do it, some Alexandria Police Department officers had arrived. Our 2 Capitol Police officers had already both been shot. Fortunately, not life-threatening wounds, but still they were hit in the leg or in the ankle, and that diminished their mobility, which in turn meant that they were not as able to defend us as they were originally. But when the Alexandria Police came with their long rifles, they took the assassin out, and as soon as they started yelling, "Shoot her down," there was quiet. And then about 4 or 5 of us ran out to where Steve Scalise was on the ground. He had pulled himself with his arms onto the right field grass. He was not able to walk because he'd been hit in the hip by the assassin. When we got to him, he was fairly lucid. We were able to talk with him. He wanted something to drink. 1 or 2 guys ran and got some Gatorade or bottled water or something and brought it to him. And I'm sitting there, talking to him. He's lying on his side, and I'm next to where the bullet hole is in his hip. And I don't know what to do. I'm not trained under those circumstances, other than try to counsel him and console him. And then Brad Winstrup, who's a congressman from Ohio, he also was a combat surgeon. He knew exactly what to do, and he took over. He told me to apply pressure to his entry wound, which I never would have thought to do. I was afraid that if I touched it, it might make things worse, not better.
Wow.
But the medical theory behind that is to put pressure on the wound in order to reduce the bleeding so that the person who's been shot doesn't bleed out. So I did that until the paramedics arrived. And then by that time, there are police officers all over the place. A helicopter came and helicoptered Steve Scalise to a hospital where he barely made it. If he had just been another minute or two later, he would have died from loss of blood. That's what the medical expert said in the emergency room. And so after everything was said and done, we had 5 of the good guys hit. One congressman, one staffer, one fellow who was helping to sponsor the congressional baseball game, and then both of our Capitol police officers, and a dead assassin.
Congressman, after this was over with, and you had time to think about what happened, how did you feel? Was you angry that somebody would come out there and shoot at our leaders for having a baseball game? I mean,
well, there was a little bit of fear factor. You became much more aware of your surroundings. Anytime you were any place, you would just naturally start looking for exit points in case another assassin showed up. You would do that willingly and unwillingly. It didn't make any difference. You just did it. Another thing that came to light is we met with the FBI. The FBI called 6 of us in to meet with them, and I was one of the 6. And they showed us on their PowerPoint presentation a piece of paper that the assassin had in his pocket. And those were his primary targets. It had our names, it had our office numbers, it had our ages, it had our physical description so he could recognize us. And I was one of the 6 that was a primary target of his assassination attempt. And as fate would have it, I don't think any of the other 5 were at the baseball practice. Like Jim Jordan, he wasn't on the baseball team. He's a good wrestler, but he's not a baseball player. He was one of the targets. Scott Desjardins, he's from Tennessee. He was not on the baseball team, but he was one of the 6 primary targets of the assassin. And the FBI called us in just to make sure we were aware of our profile. And the profile we had was probably based on our being conservative leaders in the United States Congress. And this guy being a Bernie Sanders supporter, socialist, he wanted to take out conservative leaders.
Congressman, and I don't know if we still will have the background. Actually, what he was ideology. But why is it that conservatives are the ones that's painted as a threat, as being gun owners, and usually it's a left wing extremists that are commit the assassinations or
well, assassination. The socialists are committed to their ideology. I don't know if the credit is the right word to use, but give credit where credit is due. They want America to become Marxist. They want America to become socialist. They want America to become left wing. They want America to be diminished, and they are willing to fight even to the point of killing in order to achieve their political goals. Why, in 2020, look at the voter fraud that occurred. And the voter fraud occurred. It's illegal, but they were committed to their cause enough to where they were willing to do things that are against the law in order to achieve their political goals. And those of us who believe in liberty and freedom, we need to be just as committed, not to the point of using violence, mind you, but of ensuring that America continues to respect and adhere to the foundational principles that have combined to make us the greatest nation in world history and have combined to give us lifestyles that are the envy of the world.
When you first seen what happened with President Trump well, what did you think when you seen him get shot at? Did it make you angry, or did somebody trying to take this man out?
Well, the first reaction was horrible. It was sickening um, to see an assassination attempt on TV as this thing was being broadcast. The second reaction was one of great pride as Donald Trump gets up, even though he's wounded, fortunately not fatally, as he gets up and he raises his fist and pumps it so the crowd will know that he's okay, and he's exhorting them to fight for our country. And then the crowd starts chanting USA, USA.
Mm.
Now, I took great pride
Oh
that we
God.
had Americans that were willing to show their patriotism at that awful moment. And then the next emotion was, well, but for the grace of God, there go I, because I was the target of an assassination attempt too. And like Donald Trump, we both were blessed to have a shooter who wasn't a very good shot.
Do you think that, and of course, we don't know how history will look, but do you think that that could become one of the most iconic images in American history, with the Secret Service, surrounding him, and there he is still pumping his fist up? Um, I mean,
No question. No question. And if Donald Trump wins, that will be, according to the left wing pundits, one of the reasons why he won.
do you think this right here, and we'll know in a few days, is that he's going to get a bounce out of this? Because when you look at that right there, who would you want to be your commander in chief? I mean, Joe Biden or this guy right here who just gets shot at, and I mean, like captain, my captain. I follow this guy anywhere for saying that.
Well, Joe Biden is lacking the mental capacity to make the kind of quick, informed decisions you have to make as commander in chief when thousands or even perhaps millions of lives are at stake. So Joe Biden is immediately disqualified. That leaves Donald Trump. And if that is the contrast point, Donald Trump should win in a landslide. Now, unfortunately, the socialists, the Marxists, the Democrats, I put them all together because they basically all stand for the same things. They just express it in different ways. They're committed to their ideology, and they're not going to change their minds. They're going to continue to fight for it. Hopefully, the independents, the libertarians, the non-Republicans will figure out that if you're looking for a candidate that has the mental capacity to do the job, that's a no contest race. Donald Trump, hands down, over a mentally incapacitated Joe Biden.
Okay, Congressman, I want to get in this with you. And I'm not a believer in conspiracy theories or conspiracies like this, but uh, have you've been to a lot of events? Have you ever been to one where you thought a shooter could get to within 160 yards of the president at an elevated position on a rooftop that was unsecured?
I am shocked that this shooter was able to get that close. I'm looking out my window right now at a house rooftop that's about 150 yards away, and they've got skylights, and it'd be very, very easy for me to put bullets through those skylights from here. And I'm not a marksman, okay? Marksman can put a bullet into a bullseye from 1,000 yards. And early reports are this was anywhere from about 130 yards to 150 yards, where a person who's not a marksman has a reasonable chance with a telescope of being able to hit someone, and for there not to have been law enforcement officers ensuring that those rooftops had no would-be assassins, that is one of the biggest security failures of the Secret Service in the history of the United States.
I mean, Congressman, I was in the Army, and I was by far not a sniper. I was a little above average shot, but you know, had I been that guy, I wouldn't take him out. I mean, Donald Trump would be dead today. I mean, 150 yards for somebody who's trained on a rifle, that would have been an easy shot. I mean, elevated position, beeline. Thank God he didn't have any training, or we would have lost him today. Um, it, I mean, do you have any? No, because they're there a week in advance. I mean, how could they not secure that building, that the one rooftop?
Well, I'm hopeful that there will be some congressional hearings that will answer that. Right now, Secret Service is saying, hey, that wasn't our responsibility. That was the responsibility of local law enforcement because it was outside of our perimeter. Well, that begs the question of who set the perimeter. I would think that Secret Service would have a perimeter that's close to 3/4 of a mile or a mile so that there is no chance that the President of the United States could be assassinated, given that the President of the United States is one of the top targets of assassins on planet Earth. And
Um, and
the Secret Service has a lot to answer for. I'm not buying their excuse. At a bare minimum, if they were going to have law enforcement assisting them, there needed to be written instructions as to which bodies needed to be placed where in order to secure a location where a former president of the United States was speaking and a candidate who's likely to be the next president of the United States was speaking. And Secret Service failed miserably in that.
And I've noticed usually there's a flag there that tries to block visibility from somebody that wasn't there Saturday. And don't they usually have drones that are flying around looking for people in buildings or on or would be assassins?
Well, you would think that they would have drones, and I don't know if they had them and just weren't looking, or if they didn't have them. But drones are a fairly inexpensive way of surveying the area surrounding where the president of the United States is. It's a really bad situation when it is the audience, the crowd, that is noticing that an assassin is climbing up a building and crawling across the roof of the building in order to discharge his firearm. And the latest reports indicated that it was at least a minute, perhaps longer, between the time that citizens first observed this assassin with his rifle. I mean, it's hard to hide a rifle, okay,
Right.
on a summer day where you got on shorts and short sleeve shirts or whatever. That rifle stands out. And for this guy to walk that far, get to that building, scale the wall somehow. I don't know if he had a ladder or not, but scale the wall, get to the top, and crawl across the rooftop to get to the most advantageous place to shoot. And you've got regular citizens who are hollering to police officers that there's a guy over there with a rifle, with a gun, who's getting in position to assassinate the former president of the United States. And for law enforcement not to be able to stop that first shot is just baffling to me.
Two things there. Now, I've got unconformed sources that told me that there were people that helped him, give him a boost to get up on that roof. I mean, by definition, that would be conspiracy between somebody helping him to try to kill the president.
Well, I've not heard that.
Now I can't confirm that.
Well, if it happened, there will be people who will come forth and testify to that. But that would be huge news that all the national media would pick up on, I would think. Yeah. And so we'll see how it plays out once we've had a thorough investigation about what transpired on that day and what the motive was of this particular would-be assassin.
And I also have unconformed sources that tell me this. I can't confirm it. That the one of the snipers, the spotters, his spotter had located him immediately. He zeroed in on him, and they sit there waiting. They requested permission to engage. and was sitting there waiting, and never got the order to fire. And then he opened up, and that's why he engaged. I mean, shouldn't if you say something like that, a guy with a rifle on a roof, you don't shouldn't you go ahead and immediately engage him? I mean, if you've made a mistake earlier, later, I get it, but I really make sure I carry out my duties, protecting the president, than take some kind of chance like that.
Well, again, the shooting just occurred 2 days ago, and there are a lot of facts that are coming to light, but there are also a lot of unfounded rumors that are being
Right.
spread. And time will tell exactly what happened. But if that is the case, that the snipers did not have the freedom to shoot an assassin on their own, that they had to get pre clearance, those are wasted seconds that could have saved one life, perhaps two others who are still in critical condition, and save Donald Trump from being shot.
I mean, a quarter of an inch, and president would no longer be with us.
Well, Donald Trump, without question, was very, very lucky. I don't know if you've looked at the film footage. About 5 to 10 seconds before the shots are fired, he turns his head a little bit to the right, which of course reduces the area in which a bullet can hit. And then at the moment that the bullet is being fired, he turns his head a little bit more to the right, which means that his ear was hit rather than the rear of his skull, the side and rear of his skull, where the bullet would have entered in the area of the ear and gone through the cortex, which is where the brain connects to the spinal column, and that's a fatal shot. So
Um,
he was very, very fortunate to have moved his head that additional half inch or an inch right before the bullet went where the back part of his skull used to be.
um, do you do you do you imagine what would have happened if he would have assassinated him? I mean, I think there would be just they'd almost have called martial law. I mean, I think there would be all kind of violence and destruction if that would kill Trump.
Don't know the answer to that, but it wouldn't have been pretty. And of course, the Republican National Convention that is ongoing, they would have had a very, very difficult decision. It would have been chaos within the Republican Party as they strive to choose a successor to Donald Trump. And that in turn would have helped the socialists win the White House, the House, and the Senate in November.
Um, and I think you may have been a kid then when the Kennedy assassination took place. Um, and I may have asked you this while ago. I can't remember. Stop me. The picture of Trump, those iconic images. I'm trying to think back. It seemed almost, I guess, and this may not be good because there was a death, but that picture I think maybe is iconic later on is John who was saluting the casket.
Well, no question, but that the photo of Donald Trump with his fist in the air, making sure everybody knew that he was both safe and undeterred. Um, that is an amazing photograph, and it will go down in the history books.
Yeah, I mean, somebody said for the next 25 years. I was like, no, this will 300 years from now we're gone. That will still be something. Let me ask you this: do you think that Donald Trump is a rock star? I mean, when he's up there in front of his crowd, do you think when he realized that he was on stage in front of the whole world, and I guess in his best performance, that he seized the moment to and the hit as a performer, he seized the moment, and that was the moment of his life as a in front of the crowd.
Well, there are two things about Donald Trump as a politician that I think he's the best at that I've ever seen. One is I have never seen anyone who is as skilled at ruining the reputation of another candidate as Donald Trump is. It might be Jeb Bush. It might be Ron DeSantis. It might be Chris Christie. It might be Nikki Haley. I've never seen anyone as skilled as Donald Trump is at destroying the reputation of his opponent. The other place where he is extraordinarily skilled is self-promotion. I've never seen a candidate who, in large part because of his marketing skills, that's the Trump empire based on marketing skills. I've never seen a candidate who is as good at self-promotion as he is, who can seize a moment like he has done repeatedly to his advantage, whether it be in a debate or elsewhere. And he certainly seized the moment this past Saturday when he fist pumped to the crowd. The crowd went crazy. They started chanting USA. And, I don't think there's any question, but that when the polls come out, there's going to be a significant bump in favor of Donald Trump's candidacy, much like there was a considerable bump for Ronald Reagan in his popularity when he was shot. Ronald Reagan was a very, very charismatic individual, and he knew how to seize the moment too. And he did back in the 1980s, and Donald Trump did in July of 2024.
Well, I'll tell you this, Congressman. We won't know for a few more days, but there one website that I follow, 538, the 19% accuracy. They updated again today, and since that day, they were both tied. And there's a trend that is developing, and Donald Trump is over a 2-point lead now, and he's trending up, and Biden's trending down. So there's no telling where this will end. And going into this convention, what kind of bounce he could possibly get out of this. I remember the question I will ask you about security. Do you think after, because they changed things like this for protocol, that now they will have a plexiglass in front of the president speaking then, so nobody will ever be able to get a shot close to their head or chest?
I don't know if they will or not, because a lot depends on the candidate. Keep in mind, the candidate is trying to create an image that will help the candidate get more votes. And having a candidate boxed in by plexiglass is not a good image if you're trying to win an election. It might be something that the security people won't, but it's something that the campaign managers would want.
And let me ask you a question on this right here too, because not being partisan or anything. How did you feel of President Biden's reaction? I thought he did as good as he could under the situations.
Well, President Biden's reaction is the reaction that you should get from a president when an opponent has been the subject of an assassination attempt. But I'll tell you here and now, if the Democrats believe that they need to be more strident in order to turn out their vote in November, they will be as strident as they believe that they need to be, and they will lie about their opponents to whatever degree that they believe they need to lie in order to be successful.
And something else about them, Congressman, Facebook posts, social media stuff. I mean, I've seen so many of them accused of being staged. He got what he deserved. Very few of them have condoned it. I mean, they're just almost evil, vile people.
Well, I've served in Congress for 12 years, and I can tell you from knowing a lot of these people firsthand that there's a good number of them that wish that the shooter had been successful, but they're smart enough politicians to know never to say it. Benny Thompson just got through firing a staffer who quipped something to the effect of how the assassin should have been a better shot. And while Benny Thompson fired that staffer, my personal opinion is that staffer was probably reflecting the beliefs of her employer, keeping in mind that Benny Thompson is the Democrat congressman who wanted to strip Donald Trump of all Secret Service protection and introduced legislation to strip Donald Trump of all Secret Service protection, which basically is a message that it's open season on taking out Donald Trump. You know, it was good of Benny Thompson to fire his staffer that said publicly what I believe Benny Thompson agreed with, but Congress ought to fire Benny Thompson. And certainly the voters that sent him to Washington, D.C. ought to be firing Benny Thompson if Congress itself does not remove him from office for having indirectly encouraged this kind of conduct.
I mean, I was not a fan of President Obama, but I would never want to see something happen with the president. And I think it's different between conservatives. I don't know if they ever would wish that on anybody, any of our presidents. We want to see some little weasel, a maggot, take him out in front of people. It just infuriates me. One question I want to ask you, Congressman. Yeah, like I said, the heroism and bravery that you showed that day. I mean, you don't get enough credit for, but I noticed, and tell me if I'm wrong, that when in your campaigns, you really didn't use that as a political message. Was that because you didn't think it should be politicized? What you did?
No, I did not think it should have been politicized. Unfortunately, I did have one weak moment where our advertising gurus in one campaign put together an ad that had the tape recording of the shooting taking place, and we had a time frame in which to put an ad out there because we'd already bought the airtime, and that was the only ad they put together, and they ran it. I didn't like it one bit, and we caught flack for it. But no, in my speeches, never did I try to take advantage of that.
That speaks high volumes of your character, Congressman. Just a couple quick questions, and I'll let you go. It seems like we're divided more now than we've ever been. And after this weekend, do you say there's any other way where the Republicans and Democrats can start back working together? Because when I was a kid, the
Only if the
Democrats
Democrats start being more American. If the Democrats start respecting the Constitution, if the Democrats start being advocates for the foundational principles that our founding fathers put in that Constitution that have combined to make us the greatest nation in world history, if the Democrats will start promoting those foundational principles, yeah, I'll be all in with them. But the Democrats aren't going to do it because they don't like our Constitution. They don't like our foundational principles. They want to make America more like the Soviet Union or communist China or any of these other countries that have governments that dictate to us more and more what we can and cannot do with our daily lives.
The Democrats, like when I was a kid, or '80s, the Democrats that, especially in the South, that they were nothing like what was today. I mean, Bill Clinton was seen as a left winger, far left at that time. He couldn't even get the Democratic nomination today because he'd be seen as way too conservative. They went so far out there that I can't relate to them on anything.
Well, the Democratic Party that used to be people of that ideology, I'm talking about Democratic Party of the 50s and 60s, to a very large degree, they're Republicans now. Mm-hmm. And communist / socialist movement in America has taken over the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party today is nothing like the Democratic Party when I first got involved in politics, and is nothing like the Democratic Party when I was growing up.
And I just see them keep going further and further out there. That I'm afraid that there's going to be nothing out there. And sorry, one more. Let's go. Do you think that our political divisiveness, the way it's going, that we may see more. I mean, not maybe not only the president, but governors or senators or congressmen getting targeted now by extremists?
I I think there is a risk of it having more and more often. Hopefully, I'm wrong. Time will tell. But also keep in mind that what happened or Saturday with Donald Trump is not that unusual in America. In the 1960s, you had President Kennedy assassinated. You had his brother, Robert F. Kennedy, assassinated. Both were assassinated in part, in my judgment, uh, because of the involvement of foreign policy issues or foreign nations. By way of example, I personally believe that the most likely motivation behind the assassination of John F. Kennedy was the Bay of Pigs and the missile crisis with Cuba. And Cuba and Russia were motivated to get even with John F. Kennedy, and Lee Harvey Oswald was the vehicle that they used to get even. With Robert F. Kennedy, it's a revisiting of the political fight that we have today. You have Sirhan was a Palestinian / Jordanian who did not like America's support of Israel, did not like Robert F. Kennedy's support of Israel, and assassinated Robert F. Kennedy accordingly. Then you have George Wallace, presidential candidate, assassinated in 1972. He lived, but he was crippled afterwards. You had President Gerald Ford in the 1970s, twice was the object of an assassination attempt. Then you had Ronald Reagan, who was the object of an assassination attempt. So you put all these together with Donald Trump, it seems like we have either a president or a presidential candidate who is assassinated about once a decade, either assassinated or there's an attempted assassination where the candidate or president is hit by the bullet but not killed.
Um, I mean, I live on let me ask you, sir, too. What do you think would have happened going into that convention without a president and vice president and them being just in mourning? I mean, how would they have ever got through that final candidate?
I don't know. It would have been chaos. And I don't know if they could have gotten it done in the 3 or 4 days they're allotted. It might have had to carry over. I mean, first it had to be candidates who come forth and say, I want to be president. And they would have to be given the opportunity to meet with and speak with the delegates who are making the decision. And then you have to have votes, and then you have to have runoff votes. And you have to have some kind of debate or fight over what the process is going to be. Do you just have the top two candidates make the runoff, top two vote getters? Or do you have, say, 10 candidates and you drop the bottom one or two or three? So it would have been chaos, and I don't know how it would have been resolved. Fortunately, we're not going to face that.
Okay, Congressman, I kept you on here for almost an hour, and I really appreciate you giving me your time.
Certainly.
Is there anything else that you'd like to add, like maybe a comparison or what it means or what people should take from this about how we almost lost our president or one of our leaders to some little weasel, uh, what that means for us as Americans if we lose somebody like that? I mean, like with President Kennedy.
Two messages. One, don't let this deter you from engaging in vigorous and animated public policy debates with our political foes. Be aggressive in your language and trying to persuade people of the righteousness of our cause. And two, understand that violence has no place in a republic, and those who engage in violence in an effort to determine what the path of America is going to be, they are the true enemies of our republic. Because the very nature of a republic is resolving these kinds of political disputes at the ballot box, not through force of arms.
Very well said, Congressman. Thank you for your time,
All right.
your
Go.
insights. Great talking to you again. Thank you. Have a great day, sir.